evening all, and welcome to our last talk for this term's Thinking About series. I'm Mariam, Head of Religious Studies at St. Saviour's and St. Olave's. It is my great pleasure to welcome Jon Day this evening. Jon is the Chief Operating Officer at Christians Against Poverty, and is here to speak with us about the great work that they do. We will also explore poverty in the UK and how we can respond individually and collectively. The pandemic gave all of us at St. Saviour's the opportunity to actively embrace our school's Christian ethos, whether it was through volunteering, supporting our community by donating food, or investing in our own well-being. We have all certainly overcome and helped others to overcome hurdles that we could not foresee. Please do put your questions in the chat as Jon shares his reflections. Our students, led by the head girl, Indra, will put these to Jon at the end. Thank you for your time this evening, and over to you, Jon.
Great, thanks very much. Well, hello everyone. I'm going to share some slides, so I'll just get that set up. Yeah, it's great to join you all this afternoon. As has been said, I'm Jon. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for the charity Christians Against Poverty. So in my role, I lead all of our teams that provide frontline services to people who are in poverty right across the UK. So just to be clear, we're called Christians Against Poverty. As a charity, we do help anyone. So it's Christians offering the help, but we help anyone regardless of faith or no faith. We primarily help people who are in debt. So people who are living with unmanageable debt and find themselves in a kind of crisis as a result of that. We help people find a solution to their debt issues and to build a budget that they can then live on. We also help those who are unemployed to look for work. And we help people learn to live as best they can on a low income and to learn money management tools and techniques as well. So I want to just show you a bit about CAP. We work in partnership with local churches across the UK. Everything we do is kind of a combination of our head office teams who are in Bradford and local churches. We have around 580 centres offering debt help, job clubs and life skills courses. We help over 16,000 people in the last year. And we would particularly celebrate around 2,500 people who went debt-free as a result of our work. And for those people, that's a huge weight off an individual or a family situation where they might well be feeling the pressure of that debt, being hounded by people who they owe money to. And so going debt-free can set people up for a far more kind of sustainable life to live without unmanageable debt. So as has been said in the introduction, I want to spend a bit of time just talking about the challenging reality of poverty in our country. And first off, to illustrate this, I want to tell you a story. A few years ago, I was at an event with other charities who support people in debt, and also some people who work for the government as well. And I was talking to a man who works for the government's money and pension service. And they're an organisation, amongst other things, that help people with money advice. And in the course of this conversation with this man, who I'm going to call Peter for today, I described how many of the people that we work with as a charity have empty food cupboards in their kitchen, no food at all for their family, and often have to make really difficult choices between things like food and heating. This man, Peter, said to me, "No, that can't be true. That wouldn't happen in our country. Surely that doesn't happen." Well, sadly, Peter, it is true. And in some ways, surely you should know that as someone who works in the government's money and pension service. So for you guys listening to this today, it's really important that you know the truth of what happens in the UK today. And my plan and my hope would be that for each of you as students watching this, that you end up better informed than someone like Peter who works for the money and pension service. So the sad truth is that a lot of people do live in poverty in the UK, and it's often quite hidden. It's hidden behind closed doors. It's hidden behind from a lot of our everyday lives. But I want to just take you through a few things today to kind of bring that to life and to talk about what we can do in response to it. So first off, I want to show you this chart, which is from our friends at the Trussel Trust, who run food banks around the UK. This shows the increased use of food banks across our country over the last few years. So to be clear, what the chart shows, it's the number of food parcels given out by Trussel Trust food banks in the UK from 2008 through to last year, 2021. And you may not be able to see all the numbers, but the lowest bar on this chart in 2008-9, there was 26,000 food parcels given out. And you can see, I'm sure, the rise of that chart peaking at last year, 2020 to 2021, where 2.5 million food parcels have been given out. That's a pretty shocking rise in hunger in our country. And I want to be really clear, no one wants to go to a food bank. A food bank is not a first choice for anyone. It can be embarrassing for people. People can feel sad that they're not being able to provide food for their family themselves. But sometimes people don't have a choice. And we can be really glad and thankful that there are so many food banks out there to support people. Secondly, I want to tell you the story of someone called Chris. So Chris is one of the clients that we helped at CAP. Chris had suffered a death in the family and then a relationship breakdown between him and his partner, and she moved out, meant that he had to give up work to look after his children. So Chris lost his income as a result of leaving his job. And as a result of losing the income, he then got evicted from their home. So now Chris and his kids are rehoused into an empty house, and they have debts, and they have no furniture, no beds in their home. So this is a quote from Chris. Chris says that the lowest point, I was kissing my daughter goodnight as she lay on a bin bag full of clothes with a coat for a blanket. I was desperately trying to comfort her by saying everything would be all right. So Chris and his children had no heating, no carpet, no wallpaper, no furniture in their home. You know, much of this poverty, as I say, is hidden behind closed doors. You might well have walked past that house and had no idea. But after meeting Chris, we surveyed our clients to find out how many of the people we work with don't have some of those essential items. And we discovered that 1 in 10 of our clients don't have beds in their home. I personally would not have guessed that many people in the UK are sleeping in homes without beds. So it can be really shocking for us to hear about. And one of the reasons I wanted to come and speak to you today is to kind of let you know some of these things and to make sure you're informed about it. But perhaps you yourselves will have school friends who are struggling for money and essentials in their home situation. Perhaps you yourself are struggling with that in your home situation. I just want to say right now, if it's the case for you or for anyone you know, I really would encourage you to talk to a trusted teacher or to another trusted adult about that situation and to see if there's anyone who can help you get in touch with organisations like the food banks or CAP or others who might be able to help. Now, the good news for Chris is the story didn't end there. After 3 months of them sleeping on bin bags for beds, Chris was referred through to CAP, through his social worker. And as part of our service, he received a home visit from his local debt centre, which was run in partnership with a local church. And as CAP supported Chris as he worked through our process and built a budget and found a debt solution over a number of months, he became debt-free. And I'm pleased to tell you that the family are now living in a carpeted home with beds for everyone. And Chris represents many, many thousands of people that we help like that every year. I have been working at CAP for 8 years now, and you know what? I started out with quite a judgmental attitude, particularly on this issue of people living with a lot of debt. I had I guess a sense of judgment, probably that I hadn't even realised in myself, that perhaps people were just being really reckless with their money, and they were buying things they definitely couldn't afford, and running up huge debts on credit cards and things like that. But I have to tell you that I pretty quickly learned that a lot of the poverty that we see does not come about like this. It's actually normally for our clients as a result of really low incomes and things like ill health, or ill health causing people to lose jobs, or mental health. And mental health difficulties often are very closely linked with debt issues. The two go closely together. Or perhaps relationship breakdowns, like we heard in Chris's story. So I find myself wondering, how would I handle it if I was unable to do my job, this job I do at CAP, due to ill health? What if I got really poorly, wasn't able to work, and therefore had no money coming in? One of the things that I immediately think of is I could probably get help from my wider family. So for me, I have some things that act as a bit of a safety net. But for many people, they don't have those wider safety nets. Or perhaps people who are looking for a new job, but the new job needs a car, and the car needs money, and money's only going to come from the job. So you're stuck in a circle. Or perhaps even more basically, to get to the interview needs money for the bus, and there is no money for the bus. Or perhaps people have been out of work for a few years and therefore no longer have the confidence to apply for a job, or the feeling of kind of self-worth that I would have anything that any employer would want anymore. All of those things contribute to the challenging reality of poverty in the UK today. And it's really good to spend a bit of time thinking about it, even when it's hard to hear, even when it's challenging to think about. I love your series on thinking about these sorts of topics. This is all, of course, really relevant for our country at the moment as well, with the costs of energy and food rising for people. These price rises affect everyone. We're all going to be paying more for petrol and electricity and gas and food, but it impacts people very differently. So for many more well-off families, they will be adjusting by spending less money on a summer holiday this year, or having a few less meals out, or holding off on buying that new phone. But for those who are on really low incomes, or with budgets that are really, really tight, an increase on the cost of food for this week, or energy for the home, really can mean some very hard choices. Do I eat, or do the children eat? Do we heat the house, or do we buy the food? What do we do about school uniforms? They're the tough choices that this cost of living issue is causing. I want to share with you this newspaper headline from last month in the newspaper. The headline that the cost of living crisis was going to push an extra 1 million UK children into hunger, which is a really shocking thing to read. So I've laid out for a few minutes there the issue of UK poverty. The good news is that there are loads of organisations who are doing things in this country to help people who are living in poverty. Some of these charities are really practical in their help, and I've talked about a couple of them in the Trussel Trust food banks and in CAP, where I work. But you also get charities that are kind of much more policy oriented. So they're speaking out on policy changes that they would like the government to make to help our society and to help those who are most vulnerable. So 2 examples here, the Joseph Rowntree Foundation or the Child Poverty Action Group. So I want to spend the final few minutes of my talk with you just thinking about what your response might be. And actually some of this was mentioned as we started. There are definitely practical things you individually can do. When you're in the supermarket, can you pick up a few extra things and drop it in the food bank collection point? Or perhaps you can give to charities who do help people in the UK in poverty. And by the way, I'm not going to push CAP giving on you today, you'll be glad to hear. Secondly, you can use your voice to fight for a fairer world. One shocking thing that I want to share with you is that we already produce enough food in the world to feed everyone in the world. It's only unfair distribution of food that causes people to be hungry. This slide sets it out. We require about 3.7 billion metric tons of food a year to feed everyone. But at the moment, the world produces around 4 billion metric tons of food. So we produce more than enough food to feed everyone on the planet. But about 1.3 billion tons of that food goes to waste. And some of that will be in our homes where we buy stuff that we then throw away. That 1.3 billion tons would be enough to feed 3 billion people. And yet in a world, we have 800 million hungry people. Wasting food like that doesn't make sense, and nor is it fair. So if we were to share things like food and income and housing and the Earth's natural resources more fairly, we definitely could make a massive impact on poverty in the UK and around the world. And then the final thing I want to urge you all who are listening to this today is to consider your career choices and your future in this. To think as you're coming to the end of school and as you think about what you might want to do with your lives, I'd urge you to look for roles and organisations where you know you can make a difference, to make the world a better place, to make the world fairer, to help those who are living in poverty, whether in the UK or around the world. So this could be roles in really practical ways, some of the things I've been describing, or it could be in government, it could be in policy making, looking at some of the big policy shifts that our society might need, grappling with really tough questions of how we share money well as society, how we look after those who are most vulnerable in our society. As I work for a charity, I just want to tell you a bit about working for charities in particular. Now, when I first started working for a charity a number of years ago, I expected to find, to be honest, some old ladies with collecting tins, counting up all the coins in the back of a church hall, trying their best to help people without much money, without much structure, but with a lot of care and a lot of love and a lot of heart. And the reality is that actually charities in the UK today are modern, professional, well-run organisations that will run in similar ways to many private companies that you could go and see or work at. So if you think of all the roles that you might need in any given company, human resources and people in finance and people who can do technology and digital things, people who run our operations, people who run services, sales and marketing roles, communication roles, leadership roles, all of those things are needed in charities, and all of those things are represented at CAP. The only difference for us is we wouldn't have sales, we'd have fundraising. Fundraising is how we bring in income to do what we want. This slide is live off Jobs website. This shows you a bit of the breadth of roles that would be available in CAP at the moment. I'm not necessarily suggesting you leave school and apply for this right now, but maybe one for future years. We've got a fundraising job, we've got an HR coordinator job, training, systems developer, head of debt operations. That's the kind of breadth of things that you can do in a charity. So I would really encourage you, whatever you might be interested in learning about and doing in your career, I'd urge you to consider applying your expertise and your talents and your gifts to work for a charity. You might be the best IT developer. You might have amazing skills in digital. You could definitely use that in a charity to help tackle issues like hunger and poverty. You could apply for the job right now if you wanted. You might be really creative. You might be highly artistic. You love design, you love layout, you love colours. You can make things look amazing. You could definitely work in a charity helping design websites or produce infographics that tell a story or producing booklets and leaflets for clients. My job is not a kind of fairy tale of joy every day, I have to be honest with you. I problem solve, I deal with tough things, I have days that make me tear my hair out. I don't have any hair, it might be why. But I can tell you that I love the feeling at the end of a week or the end of a year that I have, in a small way, made a difference to some people's lives, people like Chris and his children that we heard about earlier. That definitely gives great meaning and great purpose to work. And so I'd really encourage each of you, as you think about your future choices, that you consider that for yourselves. It can be incredibly rewarding, and in a lot of charity roles these days, you even get paid for it, which is amazing. So I want to leave it there. I really thank you for your time. We've got plenty of time for questions, so I will hand it over to you guys.
Thank you so much for that. And on behalf of everyone here, I'm sure they all agree with me when they say that you're so incredibly inspirational. Ever since COVID, poverty has been exacerbated. So I think people are noticing it a lot more. And it's nice to know that there are small things that we can do to make a difference. So yeah, the work you're doing is incredible. And the first question is, do you think that there is a stigma in our society about people living in poverty reaching out for help? And if so, how does Christians Against Poverty respond to this?
Oh, that's a very good question. I do think there's a stigma. I mean, as I mentioned, we particularly see a lot of people who are in debt, and there is a huge shame and stigma with debt, definitely. We find that people wait a long time before seeking help, and some of that is the shame. It is a kind of, I really don't want to have to tell anyone about this. I'd rather pretend this wasn't happening. And it is often only when things get so bad, it's like, I can't live like this anymore, I have to get help, that people actually seek help. I sometimes listen in, we have a 0800 free phone number that people can call up. And there's often such a relief at the first point of telling someone, this is my situation, this is what I owe, this is how many people I owe money to. And the fact that someone on the end of the phone is not going to judge you, is going to tell you, don't worry, we help loads of people and they all have debt and the numbers are way bigger than the numbers you've just told me, and we can help them. And over a course of months or years, we can get you out of debt and can help you. That's a huge relief for people. But yeah, I think it is a societal challenge, definitely. Yeah.
The second question is, how would you justify poverty while believing in a loving God who's meant to provide for us all?
Oh, you said they were going to be challenging questions. Getting to the heart of it now. Well, how long do you want a theological thought on this? I fundamentally believe God gives us free choice. And as humans, we can use our free choice to make horrible decisions. And the horrible decisions that we as a society make is that we're happy that some people have billions of pounds and massive yachts, and some families don't have any food. And I think God hates that, and I'm sure he's not okay with it. But I think his commitment to our free choice and us, even if we're messing it up, I think he would rather we made our choices, including messing things up, than he controlled us and gave us no free will. I think that must be a tough choice, right? Hard to be God. And then I, without this is going to sound like a far too big a claim for what it is, but then I think he also chooses to use people to bring relief. And so in some small part, CAP is part of that. Every church, every food bank, every charity, every small gift, every donation, every come round and have a meal at our house, every school lunch that's being provided, all of that I think is part of his kind of common grace and care for people. Yeah. tough question. Good thing to wrestle with. Did I get easier or harder from here, I wonder? Oh dear. They were just warming up.
That was an amazing answer to such a tough question. I definitely, I really like your answer. The third question is, from the work CAP has done, what have you and your team found is the largest cause of poverty in the UK, and what can be done to prevent these things from happening in the first place?
Oh, wow. A lot of the things I mentioned. So if you want to search, don't search now, you can keep listening, but if you want to search after this, if you search for CAP client report, we do an annual report where we show these are the people we've helped and things like this. These are the most common reasons for people to be in debt, things like that. So it's worth a read, but that will show things like, very low incomes, increasing costs that therefore just don't match income. What I can tell you right now, really, really hard situation we face and increasing over the years, is that our debt advisors who are helping to build those budgets and helping to kind of find a way through for people are now building budgets where even once the person is debt free, the income and expenditure still don't match. So even once we've dealt with this thing that you owe money to, or you've gone through bankruptcy, or we found ways of getting you debt free, we can just see that with your family of 4 children and the level of benefits you get, or whatever, and the cost of living, that we can't see how you live on that. And that is an awful situation. And I think that's where you get into the policy and the campaigning side. So CAP have done a lot of practical work. We're starting to do more speaking out. And it's because of that, like, we can't solve that individually. That becomes a societal issue of benefits, of extra support for people, of, there's been things on social media campaigns recently about how come the cheapest food has gone up, more than the expensive food. That doesn't seem fair. So yeah, I think you're then dealing with far bigger structural issues to kind of campaign and speak out about.
Hi, I wanted to ask, how has COVID-19 affected the way in which your company works? And like, how are you still seeing the effects of it?
Yeah, good question. Well, can I answer 2 different things? How it's affected our clients, and then how it's affected how we work. Because the really interesting thing is that, to start with, for our clients, actually demand for our service went down, and a lot of good provision was put in. So there was kind of, creditors were held back from really hassling people about debt. The furlough scheme and things like that help people who were out of work. And so as a result, actually, and less cost, right? People are traveling around less and there's less cost. So as a result, for a while, actually, we would have less clients getting to that point. Remember, we talked earlier about stigma and the kind of point of reaching out for help. We were getting less clients getting to that point of like, oh man, I can't do this, I need help. I would say, and I actually heard Martin Lewis, money saving expert, say this as well recently. I'd say what we're now facing for clients is way worse than COVID or even the financial crash a few years ago. The combination of the low income and the really rising cost is as bad as we've seen it. So for clients, I'd say this is worse than COVID in terms of the financial hit. In terms of how we work, as with most organisations, we had to, within, I think, 4 days, work out how everyone could work from home, and set up our teams all to work remotely. That started with lots of people sat on sort of chairs at the end of their beds and things, and gradually sort of gets better and better as you get used to it. It also meant we couldn't meet clients face to face, so there was a lot to adjust to there, video calls, and being able to maybe meet more in a church setting where you could have more space and more ventilation, things like that, less in people's homes. And it's now led to a world where we work in a hybrid way, where we have a combination of people working at home and in the office. We have to be thoughtful about when are we all in the office, making sure we make the best of those times when we're together, but also using the times when you're apart, when you can maybe get more focused work done without interruption. And of course, that gives great flexibility for people with their family lives and things. I benefit from that myself. So yeah, huge changes. I think a lot of organisations learned that they could change things quicker than they believed they could. So we joked at the time, we got everyone working at home in 4 days. If we'd set ourselves a programme to say, let's do a change where everyone works at home, we'd probably have spent 6 months on it. So it's interesting what you can get done when you have to.
So the next question is, how do you avoid systematic bias and institutional racism and ensure that all your services are available to all types of people?
Huge question. Well, I might invite you into CAP to ask that question, talk more about it. That is a thing we're really working on and looking at the moment, to be honest. We remember I said, mental health and debt go very closely together. Well, so do many other factors, and actually ethnicity and ethnic minorities and debt go very closely together. And so we recognise, especially just to be honest with you, being in north of England, less diverse kind of communities, etc., we recognise that we have a long way to go on that. We work with churches right around the country, so there is a great diversity in that way, but I think we are pretty white in our organisation and our approach. So we've been doing a lot of training, a lot of reading. One thing that we're doing a lot more of, you may or may not have heard the phrase, but speaking to those with lived experience. So rather than me designing how we help people in debt, and I've not been through that, speaking to those who are in debt or those who are from an ethnic minority background or whatever, of how can we make this accessible to you? What are the barriers currently to the service? I'm currently leading a piece of work that looks at the future of how we do our debt work. And as part of that, we're doing specific work on diversity inclusion, on equality of access, on how we support those who are most vulnerable. Especially for CAP, we work with those really very vulnerable clients. And so if we design something that says, oh, you could do it all online, you know, you need a brilliant broadband connection, you need to be fully kind of motivated to practically do it all yourself, that wouldn't serve our clients well, for example. Someone raised the fact that budgets currently won't allow for people to send money abroad if they're supporting families in other countries. Our standard way of budgeting wouldn't kind of have an allowance for things like that. So there's a lot we need to do to kind of get more culturally aware of different backgrounds and different needs in the debt service. So yeah, huge question, thank you.
So throughout this, you have mentioned a lot about the fact that living costs are rising quite rapidly. So with living costs rapidly rising, what advice do you have for people who are sitting here and might be experiencing financial worry about the rising living costs?
Yeah, well, first off, I would say if there is an issue, particularly with unmanageable debt, the sooner you seek help, the better, definitely. So I really meant what I said for all of you listening. If that's your family situation, or if you've got friends who you know are in that sort of situation, the sooner the beginnings of a solution can come in place, the easier it is to work through it. So, you know, I said people wait often a year or two before contacting us. That just means the situation is now just harder and harder to work through. I think that in some of our sort of life skills and money management courses, we talk about being really clear on the sort of difference between needs and wants. Now, this is a lot of the examples I've given you are not, they're not wants, they are needs. It's food and it's heating and it's school uniform, whatever. But maybe for those who do have a bit more money and a bit more income to kind of think about, that obviously there is a huge distinction between what you think you need and what actually you really need versus what kind of marketing is telling you need, and dissatisfaction that comes. You know, every sales pitch is a dissatisfaction with what you have so that you go and get the new thing. So being aware of, like, I'm getting bombarded with things that tell me my phone is not good enough, my car's not good enough, my house is not good enough, what I eat is not interesting enough, what I wear is not cool enough. That you're just getting pressure all the time to spend more and more and more. So even being aware of that, and being aware of that's what every company is trying to do to get you to buy their thing, I'd say that's huge. And then, you know, I'm not very good at this, but working off a budget that says, hey, I know what we have each month, and I know therefore what we've got to play with. I feel a bit bad talking about that because I'm not very good at it myself, but in theory that would be a great thing to do. Yeah.
Earlier, you mentioned that you believe God uses people to sort of counteract the bad choices that others may make of their free will. So do you believe you're one of those people? And that...
Oh gosh. That's a tough question again. I would struggle to say, hey, I believe I'm sent by God as a gift to the world. I'd like, no. I would say that I've decided, and many people I work with have decided, that we would like to spend our working hours doing something like this, and that there's a lot of people who've left way higher paid jobs to come and work at CAP. So they've chosen kind of, I'm happy to not earn as much money, but to do something I really believe in. And probably, if I'm gonna big anyone up, let me big up hundreds of people around the country who are volunteering in food banks and in debt centres, who are visiting people, often in really difficult situations. As you know, home situation might be really tough. There's mental health difficulties or whatever. There are people who are giving up hours and hours and hours every week to serve people in those sorts of ways. I think God is definitely using them in an amazing way. As I said, I've got a job that I find rewarding and I get paid for. I wouldn't claim that's hugely sacrificial. But there's a lot of people who are making huge sacrifices, yeah.
You did say that CAP helps in many ways and mostly with debts. How does CAP approach helping people with gambling issues?
Yeah, so we don't specifically support on gambling. We did have a service which was around kind of helping people think through unhealthy habits, of which gambling could be one, or spending too much on drink or cigarettes or whatever it would be. We, as time went on, we recognised that's a really specialist area, especially when you're into things like alcohol or drugs or gambling as well. So this is, I guess, there's a wider principle here of charities have got to be really clear what they do and what they don't do. We're full of passionate people who really want to serve people in all sorts of ways. And some of my job and the leaders' jobs is actually, yes, there's a huge need, but no, that isn't our role to play to solve that. And there are others doing that better. Or so in this case, we ended some of the centres that we had, but we gave away the materials and said, hey, churches, if you want to keep running this, you're welcome to, but it's not going to be a focus for CAP because we don't believe we can be specialist enough in it. So it's often one of the factors for people, and nowadays we would therefore be referring people and building partnerships with others who had more of that specialist help to suggest, and we'd be doing that across lots of different factors, gambling being one of them.
My next question you briefly answered within your talk, but
okay.
You expressed about how us as young people can take action to help tackle poverty. But I was wondering if you had any ideas as to how we can start them as a community to move to help support people who are struggling with poverty.
Yeah, well, one thing I think charities are learning and slowly getting better at, and we're talking about a lot, is starting with listening to what's needed. So there's a danger that charities go, well, we do this. So in the overseas sort of capacity, this might be, we build wells. We turn up in your community and we build you a well and we'll get you water. But that may not be what the community needs, or the community might have a source of water already, or we'll install some equipment, but then the equipment doesn't have, no one knows how to use it, or it doesn't get maintained. So the charity kind of takes a photo of the new equipment they've produced, and actually no one can look after it. And after a year, it's not being used. So I would say even for you guys in your settings, it's a really good principle to start with kind of what is already happening, what is the need, what are people telling us that is needed, and then, okay, what have we got as a group of students or a group of friends or a school or a church or a community group, what have we got that might match that need? Does that make sense? So rather than sort of assuming what people need, actually starting with listening and seeing what people themselves have, not assuming. The other thing that charities can do is think we're the heroes who, these poor helpless people who need these heroes to come along and help them. That's not the case. People are solving all sorts of things for themselves all the time. Maybe charity can occasionally say, here's a helping hand with that, or here's some training on something, or here's some money towards something. So I would come to it that way. It's a bit vague as an answer, but I think starting with listening and what do people already have? What assets do they already have? If you want to read about it, ABCD, asset-based community development, would be the kind of thinking on that, if you want to go and search that out.
The next question is, what's a quote from the Bible that you think really resounds with the work that CAP UK does?
Oh, yeah, good question. Well, I think I would think straight away of Jesus saying, whatever you did for the least of these, you did for me. When did we see you hungry? When did we see you thirsty? When did we see you, etc. So I think for us, recognizing that every person we serve is a child of God, made in the image of God, loved by God. Some of the hardest stuff is when people have given up believing in themselves and don't think, like I said about jobs, like, I haven't got any worth. I'm not worth anything to anyone. Why would anyone want me in a job? Even people who in really severe mental health get to the point of like, should I be here anymore? Really, really, really horrible, tough situations that people get to. And I think seeing God in those people, seeing Jesus in those people, and knowing that as we serve people, we are serving him, I think is a huge motivation for all of us on the team. Yeah. I don't know the Bible reference off the top of my head, sorry. I'm not that good.
So in case anyone was listening today and they felt really inspired to help out, how can we visit CAP, get in touch, trips, work experience, things like that? Is there any way we can get in touch with you guys? Yeah, so the website is capuk.org. Obviously, if you want to go and give £1 million to capuk.org, feel free, and feel free to mention it was me who inspired you to do it as well. We do have an internship program, so people can come for a year and kind of get some training, but also get to work in real jobs, doing real stuff, and often that leads into roles. So I'd encourage you to look at things like that and at other charities too. You can also, on the website, there is a postcode search for what are the local centres offering debt help or job clubs or anything in my area. So you can, and there's loads around London. So you can also kind of find out there, there might be a debt centre that I could go and help with, or volunteer at, or things like that. So that would be a good place to start. And the £1 million. Don't forget the £1 million.
If I could just come in and ask a question, Jon. Thank you so much for really shedding light in terms of what Christians Against Poverty do, and also just highlighting that it's not specifically just for Christians. It is also for any and everybody, because it has been created by God if you subscribe to Christianity. But just going back to your everyday role, I'm just thinking about working in the charity sector. I'm sure there tends to be times where your resources are limited. What would be the most frustrating aspect to your role? Because you do want to do this good deed. What would be the most frustrating part to your role?
Yeah, interesting. I think it is that mismatch of, we see so much need, and as I said, we're any charity, we're a bunch of incredibly compassionate people who are driven to help. And there are times when you have to choose, well, either we can't afford to help in that way, or we don't think it's right for us to help in that way. We just don't think that's the right thing for our charity. That's a tough, when you're dealing with people and people's lives, to say we're not helping people, particularly with gambling issues, that's a tough choice to make, right? Those things can be frustrating. Equally for us, I mentioned on one of the slides, we work only in partnership with the local church. So I'll tell you another frustration. There might be people in debt in wherever, Swindon, and there's no church currently that will run a debt centre in Swindon, therefore we're not able to help people in Swindon. Now the what's the word, the sort of counterbalance to that is there are other charities offering debt help nationally through phone or online, so we're not leaving people with no support. There are others we will signpost to and refer to, but it can be frustrating, like, we'd love to reach more people in that town or that place. Or this church now can't do as much because they've lost some volunteers, so they can't help as many people, or things like that. So we would describe our partnership with the church as the kind of biggest strength of our model and a weakness of our model. I wouldn't do it any differently. We believe that the kind of community and wider support that people get through the church partnership is hugely beneficial. But yeah, that can be frustrating if it limits us.
And Jon, have CAP ever thought about working with young children, maybe starting workshops in order to financially educate young people so that they can grow up to become much more aware? Yeah.
Well, we have a, I didn't talk much about it in what I shared, but we have a kind of money management course called Cap Money. So again, you can search for that. And that's a 3-week kind of training on how to handle money. And there have been different versions. So there's definitely been a Cap Money for students. I don't think we've done it for younger than students, but you're right. And again, you know, we're as an organisation, we're friends with Martin Lewis, money saving expert, and this would be a huge thing for him. Like, why the heck are we not teaching money management and budgeting skills in the school curriculum? I mean, I genuinely don't understand why that isn't a life skill, especially at a time when money's tight, and you know, and it can get people into all sorts of trouble, you know, not feeling overwhelmed by it or not knowing how to. So yeah, that's probably more a campaigning advocacy one, where you go, this should just be a matter of course for our society. Yeah. You guys ask better questions than a lot of people I speak to, just want you to know.
What encouraged you to start working with Christians against poverty?
Yeah, good question. It's partly that church partnership element that I mentioned. I really, really like the fact that there's this sort of combination of head office skills and specialists, and then these kind of incredibly loving and caring and compassionate people in each church who are, some of them might be paid in the church, many of them are volunteers in the church. So that I just think that's such a winning combination. We're running a highly regulated, complex operation at head office. It's regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority. It's really serious in that way. But combine that with these amazing people on the front line, often who are maybe older, retired, and can just kind of look after and love people in their situation and tell them it's going to be all right. You can, you know, help them go food shopping or make them a cup of tea or whatever it is. I really like that combination. And I like that, you know, you've asked about faith and where's God in all this. You know, I really like the fact that, as one of my colleagues would say, we're Christians against poverty. It's what it says on the tin. It's quite kind of out there, and we do offer to pray with people, so there is no obligation. But when we're supporting people, we'll offer to pray for them. Most clients say yes. Most clients find that kind of lovely and caring. But equally, if people say, I want nothing to do with that, please don't pray for me, please never mention your face to me, then we just serve people in exactly the same way as we serve anyone else.
Okay, so my next question is, what sets CAP apart from any other charity? Why is it special?
I mean, I think I'd struggle to say we are entirely unique. There are many charities I really admire. I think the things that are more unique about us, I think being boldly Christian and being okay with that, and not being kind of shying away from being motivated by faith and believing in God, I think is not entirely unique, but it's pretty rare these days. And it can lead to lots of questions and lots of mistrust. I would say, yeah, this partnership with the church is pretty unique. Certainly CAP's been going 25 years, and when it started, it was very, very unique in that this idea of kind of working in partnership with churches around the country was a really new idea. Food bank kind of uses that model. Most food banks are run out of churches, most. Anything else? Yeah, no, they're the biggies. They're the biggies. Faith and that church partnership. Yeah.
We have a question from the Q&A asking if you guys help other countries except for the UK.
Yeah. So yeah, there is CAP in order of where they started. There's CAP in Australia, in New Zealand, in America, in Canada, and in America. So there's 4 other CAP countries. Part of the reason they all sound like quite similar countries, and that's partly because of the debt work. So the debt work relies on a certain approach to banking, to finances, to creditors, things like that. So the model of how we do debt work wouldn't work in some countries. Equally, we think on things like the job clubs that I mentioned, helping people in unemployment and teaching money management, that can go anywhere. It doesn't need a regulated banking system or whatever. So there is, over time, there is a kind of desire and a hope to be able to do that in more countries as well. Yeah.
And I just wanted to ask if you have any like closing notes to leave the audience with.
Well, yeah, I want to thank you for the questions as well. It's been really, really good, engaging conversation. Thank you, stretching my thinking as well in it. I think I would just leave everyone with a sense that like you can do something in this. So things that you might have found hard to hear or challenging, you can do something personally. I would love some of you on this call to, in 20 years, be saying, well, I started thinking about working at a charity because of this talk I heard one day at school. Like, that would be amazing. So if that happens, find me online and tell me it happened in 20 years' time, and I'll be a mentor to you.
Well, we just wanted to say thank you for you giving up your time and telling us more about poverty in the UK. I also want to say thank you to the audience and for the co-hosts for all of your questions and contributing to this.